Hi everyone, this is Ivo Maropa again with you, and in this video I'm going to continue talking about, of course, Hegel, okay? And I'm going to use the relationship between contingency and necessity to do so, okay? Because that's a very useful tool to understand Hegel, okay? And I'm going to use a very trivial example to do so, which is the example of the flip of a coin. If you flip a coin, while it is still in the air, its status is indeterminate. But once it arrives on the palm of your hand, it is destiny. Okay? And once it arrives on the palm of your hand, no one questions its authority. Why? Because it's contingent. It's an indifferent determination. It could be either this or that. No one knows. No one can determine it beforehand. And once it happens, it is destiny. So it retroactively posits its necessity, as Zizek would have put it. Yes, it retroactively posits its own necessity. Once it happens, it's totally indeterminate, it's contingency. But once it is here, it is as if the whole past was pointing towards this very contingent moment. Okay? Because Hegel is again very much concerned with the problem of freedom, how to account for this very radical, comical, and paradoxical problem of freedom. So he's all the time using this relationship, okay? Be it implicitly or explicitly, this relationship between contingency, that which is random, it could be either this or that, and necessity. Okay? Because our acts, they are explosive, they are excessive. Okay? This is what Zizek would have called an indivisible remainder. Our act is an indivisible remainder. There's always a surplus, a residue, a remainder that has to be tamed, if you will. Okay? So what you get with this remainder through a very lengthy paradoxical play, we get a reconciliation by the end of it all. And of course, with Hegel, it's a comical ending, because the ending is in a way the proper beginning. Because just think of what you get by the end of the phenomenology of spirit. You get absolute knowing, absolute Wissen, which is again kind of a proper beginning, because the science of logic only takes place after you have gone all the way through the phenomenology. So that's the ridiculous aspect of it. What you get by the end of the whole phenomenology of spirit is simply the proper beginning to the science of logic. Because absolute knowing, absolute Wissen in Hegel, is basically a kind of, it's the Lacanian, there is no big other, or there is no meta language. Okay? It's the proper beginning from which presuppositionless science, which is the science of logic, can begin, can have its beginning. Proper. Okay? So Hegel is all the time dealing with many ridiculous, absurd paradoxes. Okay? He's all the time trying to arrive at a reconciliation by the end of it all. Okay, which is of course a very ridiculous reconciliation, because as I already pointed out, it is the proper beginning in a way. Okay, you what you get is a spirit as spirit, consciousness as consciousness, because the pure form of self-consciousness is the very source of it all when it comes to Hegel's phenomenology. So we have this very comical procedure in Hegel, right? So again, how does one understand the relationship between contingency and necessity? It's simply the way Hegel deals with the surplus, the abyssal surplus of the act itself of our mind. Okay? It generates an excess which it has to be dealt with. Okay? And through this whole process of trying to deal with this excess through many paradoxes, Hegel arrives at a very comical reconciliation. Okay? Which is again to identify with its own obstacle, with its own impossibility. Okay, a thing overcomes itself by identifying with its own impossibility, its own obstacle, to fully be what it is supposed to be. Okay. Well, okay, let's go back to the relationship between contingency and necessity, because it's a very key passage in Hegel. So again, how does we have a pure efficacy or authority without a ridiculous remainder in Hegel? By the flip of a coin, by the example of the flip of the coin. You flip the coin, and while it is in the air, it is indeterminate. It is radically contingent. And by being radically contingent, it can arrive as necessity without remainder. It simply is what it is. And no one questions the flip of a coin once it arrives on the palm of your hand. Okay, once it arrives, it is destiny. So it's very useful to utilize this example, for example, to understand the superposition notion in quantum physics. Okay, it's indeterminate. We have quantum oscillations, we have waves, but then the collapse of the wave function happens, and we have a singularized entity called a particle. Okay, so that's the way how we arrive at singularity in Hegel. It's very much like what we have in quantum physics with the concept of superposition. Okay, so understanding the relationship between contingency and necessity is a very useful tool to understand the gist, the crux of the matter, what is really at stake when it comes to Hegel's philosophy. Okay, so I hope this very brief video could be helpful for you. Okay, I apologize for all my mistakes, because I improvise as I go along with my thoughts. But yeah, that's all for today. Thanks for watching.